Hey, Adni fam, it is Anthony. We have a legend today, a healthcare staffing legend. Super honored to be joined with Peter Leibowitz, who is currently the Vice President of Nursing and Allied Recruitment at Adelphi Medical Staffing. But beyond your experience there, Peter has been really in healthcare staffing for many, many years, working at cross country, different medical staffing agencies all the way big and small. So we're really grateful, Peter, for you joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. This is fun to me. I love the industry, and legend. Okay, I'll take it. I'm going to put it on a shirt now. But legend or just 35 years now. I think we've been doing this in a variety. So at this point, you you have to love it to be doing this for so long, and I do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I would love to go back to the beginning, Peter, and just tell us, how did you get into healthcare staffing and kind of how did you get to where you are today throughout the journey?
Sure, sure. I tripped into this. I'm going to be honest. I went to school planning on going on for my master's in student personnel. So I thought by now I'd be dean of students somewhere. That was the original plan. Took a year off after college and said, "Well, we've got to make some money. Let's take a job." And I applied like every college kid. Oh, that looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And I ended up at a local per diem staffing agency in just outside of Boston, called American Healthcare Personnel. Um, was there for a short period of time, maybe 6, 7 months, and moved on to a little bit larger company. But at that point, I think is when I started to grasp me of like, wait a minute, I really think I like this. I enjoy this. Now, it was a very different world. I was talking to someone the other day about it, of flashing back to the day when people had to bring their time cards into the office. I think you and I may have joked on our original call of, I go back to the days when nurses had to have three color pens, and that's how the coding was done. That's what we were dealing with in the office, and we tracked everything in a book with a highlighter. So it's kind of interesting to see where we've come today. But I started off in the per diem, made the move pardon me, after about 4 or 5 years into the travel nurse world. And that's where I'd probably say it really kicked in for me. I loved it. I've done in-house at a couple facilities as well. But really that travel world, I say for all healthcare professionals, I've done nursing, allied, you name it, respiratory, imaging. It's all in the toolkit at this point.
That's amazing. Super, super awesome. And yeah, it seems like a lot of folks in this space will sometimes just fall into it as well. I think that's a common sentiment. And then, yeah, you end up loving it. And I think that throughout your career in healthcare staffing, you can make a difference in that, you're staffing these healthcare workers that are caring for patients in, across the country. So it's pretty amazing.
My degree is actually social work, and
Oh,
it was about
wow.
helping people.
Yeah.
And I still believe in that. And whether I'm rationalizing it for myself, I love the fact. First, I love the fact that I get to help people find jobs that hopefully mean something to them and help move their personal or career along or whatever might be needed. But ultimately, I always come back to the patient. My first thought when I started doing staffing, when I mentioned that first company, we were doing primarily per diem in nursing homes. And my great grandmother had been in a nursing home. And my initial thought was anyone I place has to be taking care of her, even though, she had passed at that point. But that was my philosophy. 35 years later, that's still my feeling. Anyone I'm placing needs to be taken care of. It might be my family or your family or someone's family. So that it's not always about the almighty dollar. It is still about caring.
Yeah.
And bottom line, it's about the patient.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all agree. We're all here to serve patients, and that kind of being our North Star, I think, is really powerful. Um,
Mhm.
so, considering your career, you've kind of done a little bit of everything in the recruiting space, from big agencies to smaller ones. I'd be curious to know, like, if you have any advice for any healthcare recruiters out there. I know that the market's always shifting and changing. So, yeah, if you were to talk to some like new healthcare recruiters entering the space today, what would your advice be to them?
Um, be themselves. Don't try to look at maybe the successful person next to you who's, this very, recruiter's been there for years. learn from them, take some things from them. We all borrow from each other. You learn taglines, you learn other things along the way, but ultimately don't try to be something you're not. I flash back to I had a supervisor years ago who tried to turn me into him. When I was a recruiter, I was a nut. I sang to my healthcare professionals. I talked in an Elmo voice. I gave them recipes. That was my gig. I liked connecting with people. He was much more stoic or businesslike, and that's again beautiful. The best thing was when he came up to me and said, "You know what, Pete? I can't do what you do, and you can't do what I do." And I said, "Exactly." So it's about being yourself. You need to put in the effort, the time, and don't again, don't try to be something you're not to the people you're working with. It is a funky position because you're sales, but you don't want to be sales.
Right.
If you don't want to come across like, well, what's it going to take to get you into this car today? I've got that voice. I have to almost overcome that voice. Um, but find your voice, find what makes you that person's going to connect with the professionals you're working with. That's ultimately
Yeah.
the first step to success.
I love that advice, Peter, because I think that what you're really saying is just be genuine, right? Like that kind of genuineness is really what will build the connection and will help you succeed as a recruiter. I think it's really great advice, especially when you kind of look at the landscape now, all the technology and automation, which is great. You definitely need that tech to optimize different workflows that are very tedious and manual. But I think at the end of the day, still having that human touch with your healthcare workers is so
It's
important.
circle back. It's interesting these last couple of years. Obviously, it's been crazy last few years. We went obviously through COVID. Pardon me as I cough. Um, in these last couple of years now, the transition back to as a recruiter, we're asking our recruiters, call, connect, reach, reach, reach. During the COVID stretch, we had a lot of people, a lot of healthcare professionals jump in. For let's say the dollar aspect or whatever was important to them. But in particular, that obviously became a driver. The the recruitment effort is kind of almost what I did back in the day when I first started. I want to say, start calling, start calling, start calling, start calling. And I get it. I understand on the healthcare professional side, they're getting inundated by recruiters, left, right, and center. There's tons of them. So you need, again, coming back to that, almost finding your voice. How do you express that genuineness so that maybe somebody wants to get back to you, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a message on Facebook, a text, or whatever. It can't just be oh, please call us. We have a job. Everyone has a job.
Yeah, yeah,
What are you going to stand? So we've kind of come back to being humans again, I think,
yeah,
with the help of technology. We need it. Technology is incredible. As I said, and I used to do my highlight, the person worked 3 to 11 or 11 to 7, but it's so necessary. And now you're seeing AI obviously getting involved that, how we're utilizing that tool. It is interesting, but I always come back to this is still a touch business. I personally have always felt that the recruiter's job is to connect with their people that they're trying to place. I take great pride in, I was joking, looking at my Facebook earlier, that I'm still friends with 3 of the healthcare professionals I worked with 20 years ago.
Aw.
That we still wish, not that we're hanging out, keeping it, but hey, happy birthday. Hey, did you see unfortunately, one of them was a Bills fan this weekend. I didn't want to mention
Uh,
it, but just that's that connection. And I still think that's viable today. Um, but technology obviously is an added plus to it.
yeah. No, I think that's so well said. Even as we've been building Adni, I think like obviously leveraging AI and automating workflows and trying to make things more streamlined. But at the end of the day, I think still having like recruiter profiles and the community is still something that's so important. I think a lot of technology platforms are kind of missing out on and trying to eliminate. But I do think in staffing, it's just so important, as you said, to still have that human touch, because healthcare workers care about it. And when they're getting automated messages from so many different places, I think you really can stand out as a recruiter when you do build your brand, have your genuine vibes, and actually do care about the workers that you're recruiting for. So
And we touched on the combination of the technology and the I think you and I in a previous conversation touched on, with the ease of use for someone.
Yeah.
That's what it should be. We don't need to make this another complicated technology that a healthcare professional needs to learn and get to know on top of whatever they may be using at their facility, Epic or whatever else.
Right.
It's you want something that's like, okay, I'm looking for something to help me take me by the hand and get me to that point where now we can connect as humans and people and talk. Not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. As a recruiter, I actually passed off a couple people said, "We're not going to jive. I'm not what you're looking for." And that's okay. And I would get them to a recruiter that might be a better fit, which was unusual. But you can still get to that point. Again, the technology is that the accent to it. As I've said to you in the past, I love to cook. I say you need the paprika, you need the garlic powder. It's another seasoning in the recipe.
Yes. I love that. Shifting gears a little bit, curious what your number one piece of advice is for new travelers in the healthcare space. Just entering, getting their feet wet, maybe a little bit scared by all of these agencies and recruiters and words. What would your advice be to them?
Take some time before you approach the agencies. Figure out what you want. Understand what your priorities are. Is it, as I said, we went through the dollar thing in COVID, and maybe that is still a priority for someone. Maybe it's the location, maybe it's a relocation, maybe it's the education aspect if I want to do something different. I recommend you usually trying to understand it, you need to understand yourself in before you're going to take a position.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I would say to a recruiter, be smart when you're presenting jobs. So, for example, if I had a nurse who worked in a small community hospital in middle of somewhere, Iowa, I don't know if I want to put them necessarily into New York Presbyterian and into this crazy, huge, big city hopping. So kind of flipping it back now to the healthcare professional, understand, wait a minute. Yes, I'm a med surg, ER, labor delivery, whatever type of nurse, but try to find that right fit,
Yeah.
and ask those questions to make sure you're getting it because you will have recruiters who are going to tell you up front, maybe that's not the right one. And unfortunately, you also have probably people like, look, it's not always square hole, square peg. Just because you're a labor and delivery nurse, maybe this isn't the right job. So understand what you want so you can ask those questions. And then it's going to come back to it's a simplification. We touch on being human, that gut. What are you hearing back from the agency? Do you feel you're getting the full story, the truth? That's what I used to challenge people when I was a recruiter. I always assumed they were talking to seven other companies. I said, if your
Yeah.
gut tells you I'm your guy, let's do it. If not, okay, but I'm going to try and earn that. I don't want that to go away. I'm going to try and earn that. You really have to ask those questions, understand about the agency. There's a lot of great agencies out there, which is terrific for this business. I'd rather, if I lost somebody to another agency, I'd rather they had a good experience because they're going to stay traveling or, stay within the business.
Right.
So really having that insight beforehand to say, I know what I want and ask those questions. It's not for everybody. Not everyone's a fit for travel.
Yeah. It's really well said. Yes. I think step one, just kind of identifying your priorities is, I think that's really good advice. Figuring out what you want, what your preferences are, what's your kind of wish list, right? Because no contract is ever going to meet all of your needs, right? It's
Yeah.
like, gotta have that like wish list, prioritize it though, because it's kind of impossible and unrealistic to expect every single one of those boxes to be checked. So I think it's good to kind of prioritize and what
And they
matters to you.
change. They change. I had a respiratory therapist years ago. We were working together, and she was in Seattle for a long time. And then finally, she called me one day. She goes, "Pete, I'm broke. I can't live this life. It's too, I love Seattle." She was out enjoying the area. She goes,
Yeah.
I need to do something else. So I said, wait a minute. I have another job. It happened to pay top dollar. It was middle of nowhere, New Mexico. I said, I'm going to put you there for 13 weeks. You're going to work, you're going to go hiking, you're going to do nothing else, and you're going to make a lot of money. And then we'll send you back to Seattle or Boston or New York, wherever you want to go. So you need to hear the priority, what's important, what does a person need, what are they looking for? I've had the relocations. Okay, let's work with that. Some people are set on I just want to be here. Other people have more things open. So that's what makes it fun for me. I love the different drivers that I get to hear about when I sit. Ultimately, as much as I'm in a VP role now and I'm not caught up in the title of it, I still call myself a recruiter. I love getting on the phone still and talking to people. Hey, what's important to you? So it's great hearing those different stories.
I love that. That's so awesome. It's super cool that you still can have a touch with the recruiters, picking up the phone and still having that human touch, which is really awesome. So as someone who's been in the space for, so many different places and years of experience, curious, like, what is your prediction of the future of the healthcare staffing industry? Like, where do you see the industry going in 5, 10 years? And how do you think that it's evolving based on kind of the trends you're seeing?
Sure. I've had a running joke for years. If I could predict, I would have been retired 10 years ago. That
Don't we all? We all
Yeah,
just
I
want to
mean,
try to understand.
it's such a roller coaster. I'm gonna shoot straight. I don't know what I want to say about 5 years. I think looking ahead at this year, I'm going to go back a year and kind of looking ahead. Last year was such a transition year that we were still coming out of that COVID aspect of travel, that there were still people figuring out, oh, wait a minute, is this still for me? Is this what I want? Facilities kind of getting over the barrage that they went through. I felt we were still in that transition time. We've come back to I struggle on the word normalization because I don't know if any of us know what normal is anymore. But we're back to kind of that more normal sense of things. But I do think you're going to see a lot more consolidation of the travel business this year. I think a lot of people have talked about that. I think you will see a slight increase in business. We're not going back to the COVID days, and we shouldn't go back to the COVID days. That was such a odd thing I never pictured. If you had asked me that 5 years before, I'm like, oh, we're going to deal with a pandemic. That's going to be crazy. I think we're going to continue to see this market kind of consolidate, get back to maybe a little bit of what it was pre-COVID. Specialties will continue to change. Unfortunately, we're still seeing people aging out of the industry. So I think there'll be kind of that regular normalcy that we've seen for years of this business, 5, 10 years down the road. But where are those fluky things that are going to happen? And what's the next big thing? There's always something coming up. I mean, I started off, as I said, I was one of those people initially like, oh, the technology, we're still a human business. Now I embrace it all. What's next? What's next for us? So there'll be more changes. I don't know if we're going to predict it, but I think at the basic core, it's still going to come back to what we've touched on of let's make sure we're taking care of people, that we're communicating constantly. I think
Yeah.
that's always going to be a constant of all of this.
Yeah, no, I think that's so fair. I agree. It's going to be a continuous balance of kind of implementing this technology and keeping the human touch and relationships. And on that point, the question that we ask on every episode kind of deals with Adni's own personal like ethos and mission of really kind of this vision of unifying healthcare, streamlining the experience for healthcare workers. And as we've kind of touched on, like this idea of like rehumanizing healthcare staffing, I think that there's this pendulum of like technology that has kind of gone one way, but I think we need to leverage and implement technology in workflows, but still keep those kind of human touch points with the healthcare workers so that they do feel supported in their journey. Curious, in your perspective, why do you believe that keeping that human touch, rehumanizing this process is still so important, maybe not more than ever, kind of in the post-pandemic land, and as we are implementing new technologies like AI into the space?
This may be simplistic, but ultimately, this is still a caring business. Nurses, a variety of healthcare professionals, respiratory imaging, etc., physicians. Um, I used to say look, a lot of these people who chose to pursue these degrees weren't planning on being technology experts. The technology as it's provided to them needs to help add to that caring passion. So the humanization, I think, is always going to be there because that's just the nature of this business. I don't think
Yeah,
anyone's getting into this go, I want to get rich or I want to really learn technology. I want to care for people. I want to make sure that I still flash back to when I'm going to cry a little. When my oldest daughter was born and the nurse in the NICU, because my daughter ended up in the NICU, And I was watching how much she cared and what she did for all these babies who it broke my heart to watch and look around and to see this. And ultimately that's who I'm working with. So the humanization, I think, is just built in. The other pieces, as we touched on for Adney and the other companies, how does that accentuate it? How does it help move it along? What's the ease of it? If it becomes too complicated, makes it more challenging. But that
Yeah.
humanization is there, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it's so true. At the end of the day, like we are in an industry that is about caring for human lives. So I think that at its crux, even in the recruiting, kind of all the way through to the patient, um, I think we have to kind of remember that is like what we're rooted in here. So really well said. And would love for us to kind of end the podcast by plugging Adelphi Staffing as well, and kind of what you're doing there. If you could tell us a little bit about
Sure.
your staffing agency.
Sure. We have been around for about 7 years, and we do both, well, both a lot, travel, nursing, healthcare professionals, locum, covering the whole country. I will tell you, and being upfront, I joined this company a couple months ago, and I love it. It's we're going to kind of about the humanization. This is real people. We're not caught up in some of the other things. It's like if we do the job right and service the people that we're supposed to take care of, then we're going to continue to grow and be successful. We're not trying to be the, $8 billion juggernauts and out there. And you know what? They're wonderful. I've worked at them. They're great. Um, we're a small agency that still has that ability to really connect on that one-on-one basis. And I don't think we'll ever lose that. That's a priority of the ownership, the leadership, and of the recruiters that sit in the seat. Actually, everybody who sits in the seats. So we're expecting to grow this year. We're expanding our operations significantly. We've added recruiters. We've updated technology. We're getting into other areas of staffing. So I think you're going to continue to hear our name out there.
That's amazing. Very exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Peter. Everyone be sure to go to adelphimedicalstaffing.com to check it out. And Peter, is there anywhere else that folks can get in touch if they're interested in like seeing your jobs or just learning more about the staffing agency?
Sure. I'll do two things. My email, peter@adelphistaffing.com. Uh, don't hesitate. If you have a question, anything you're like, hey, Pete, I just want to bounce this off you, please feel free. I love being a resource for people. You can find me, I will say, on LinkedIn, Peter, Leibowitz. Please feel free to send me an invite to connect there. We will be updating a bit of our social media, so look for us a little bit more on the Facebooks and Instagrams and LinkedIn's of the world. But you can find Adelphi there and connect with us, and we're happy to get back to you right away.
I love that. And I think a great thing to end on is like, don't be scared to reach out. I think that's a great piece of advice. Like, you don't necessarily need to be like 1000% like, all right, I'm ready to start traveling today. You can always reach out, kind of learn more information about it, and kind of know what your options are. And Peter is definitely a great resource. So, with that, thank you so much for joining us, Peter, and hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thank you, my friend.